Okay, so the first thing we did is we went in and we hit cancel right when we established Pro Tools. We're going to go to the setup window. So this is where all the fun stuff happens. And once you set this, you should be able to forget it. So Playback Engine confirmation here. Notice what mine says. Built-in output, that tells me that immediately there's probably an interface problem, or there may be some interface configuration problem. Yours should say inbox.
All right, this one, the mouse ain't working on that.
Will it fire up on this one? Oh, you just have to reconnect it.
Yeah, pull it out, disconnect it.
Oh,
Here.
no, you have to do it here. That should light up. All right, William, I'll have to catch up with you.
Okay.
Okay, so here's the thing. Go ahead and hit that Playback Engine drop-down list. Click on that drop-down list. Do you see your inbox listed, yes or no? Yes? All right, go ahead and select it. In the event that you don't. In the event that you don't. So here's the trick, the workaround, all right? And again, make sure you wrote this down, because this is stuff you're going to get quizzed on Wednesday, all right? If it hits the board, you're getting quizzed on it. Expect it. Basically, it says, number 1, interface on. Number 2, Pro Tools open. Number 3, hit cancel. Number 4, confirm Playback Engine. Number 5, confirm I/O. And number 6, open session. So, yes, when you get there, hit cancel. Yep, cancel. And then go to setup. Playback. Yep, playback. Okay. Yep, and then hit that drop down where it says Playback Engine. Hit the drop down, and if you have inbox, go ahead and select it.
Did you design the inbox?
Yep.
Okay.
Okay, so here's the workaround. If at this point, and this is why it's easier to have the interface established as an on. If the interface isn't established on, you have to do a workaround. The workaround is if ever your interface is not listed here, don't worry, reset your interface, either by powering on, powering off. If that doesn't work, try that first. If it doesn't work, you have to reconnect maybe, but power on, power off, or reconnect. The USB, I hate USB, just so you know. Why do I hate USB? Because USB bus powers are faulty, and a lot of times they trip. The best bus powers are two type, Thunderbolt, Firewire. Right? Those are the premier bus powers. The other thing is just so you know, USB, if you didn't learn this, you should have learned this in Pro Tools 2, or at least one of your other recording classes. USB 3, it's on the rise. People really aren't making it for audio yet. It's not something that's happening. This is USB. Check it out. USB does this and does this. In, out. Not simultaneous. Think about that. It's not the I/O, in-app communication from a USB port is not simultaneous. It has to go one way, then the other. One way, then the other. One way, then the other. Well, heaven forbid you guys are recording on a USB interface. You record into a USB interface, sending audio in. If you're trying to establish monitoring, where are you hearing it? Back out, right? That means what Pro Tools or other software has to do is they have to find a way to do a delay offset. So a lot of times what they'll do is they'll build a mix knob. You see all these USBs have a mix knob on them? See that? What that mix knob is, hard right means it goes to the computer and then to your headphones. Hard left means it just goes to the box, in the input, out the headphones. The whole purpose of that is because no matter how hard you try, you can't get this latency to be 0. There's always going to be latency because of the communication to and from. Notice if you ever have a Firewire interface, I love Firewire interfaces. I recommend them for sure. Firewire is simultaneous. Same time. Firewire is the same time, simultaneous communication, which means your interface on Firewire has a lower latency and it communicates much faster. It also does not suffer from power loss in most cases. Now, I'll also be pretty frank about this. If your peripherals, let's just call them, peripherals meaning keyboards, control pads, hard drives, interfaces, if they don't have a separate power supply, they are very much at risk of what we call bus reset. A bus reset happens on a computer anytime too much power is drawn. Too much power gets drawn because of a surge in activity. So let's say you have an overload of USB devices, an overload of even FireWire devices. Notice your lacy hard drives have no power supply. These are actually fairly consistent overall. Like I haven't really had many problems with these before. But I'll just say this. They still are at risk for bus reset. So if the computer decides, you know what, we have to reset the bus because of the power draw, it'll shut it off temporarily and then it'll reestablish connection. It's very frustrating to deal with on a normal basis. This may be the reason, though, why even mid-session your playback engine might go out on a USB device. Or even on a FireWire device that has no separate power supply, because there's not a consistent level of power being drawn. So in the event that it did not appear in your list, all of you it did, that's great news. If it didn't, the workaround is you shut the device off, you turn the device back on. It doesn't show up in the list. What the trick is if you just hit OK and you reestablish with the original, whatever was in this list, open the playback engine again, it won't show up, the new one, the device that wasn't added. What you do instead is pick anything on the list, and it'll try to reconfigure. And when it's reconfiguring, it'll notice something's been added, your device that was off, it'll add it to the list, you just go back in, open it again, and establish your communication. Pretty simple. But the thing is there's not a book in the world that has that information in it. You might find that on a forum, you might find that in some sort of workaround, but I mean, Pro Tools doesn't publish that information. So that's one of the tricks around the playback engine. Best trick in the world around your playback engine problem, interface has to be on before you open Pro Tools. Now I'll add this, okay, particularly for this room. For this room, if you ever, I'll just state this now, okay? If you ever walk in and the computer is on, restart it. You may spend 30 minutes, 30 minutes is valuable to a certain degree. For me, 5 minutes is valuable. You know what I can do in 5 minutes? So a waste of 5 minutes sucks. A waste of 30 minutes is killer, especially if you wasted a whole class. I've had students come in for a whole class, they didn't make it past the first 30 minutes and they gave up for the rest of the session. And most of the time it's because they sat in on a computer that was already on and they started dorking around, forgetting that when you restart the computer, it refreshes all your peripherals. So I've been on the phone with Avid and said, hey guys, I'm having this problem. Years ago, I haven't had problems in many, many years. Years ago, I sat on with Avid for hours, waiting on hold, trying to get a hold of it. I'm having a problem, You know what they told me? Simplest thing in the world. Restart your computer, disconnect everything. Everything. Like cable from computer, cable from interface. Right? Reconnect it, fire it up. But the catch was, wait 60 seconds. Because most people will do a restart, and most people will do a reset, but they'll literally go boop, boop. Right? You guys ever done that? Oh, I'm going to reset the USB, boop, boop. Right? Not establishing any time. I had a major problem with my Apple computer one time. I called in, I'm like, guys, what's going on? Their response to me was, oh yeah, power it down, disconnect the power cable from the wall, the power cable from the computer. Apple computers, anybody on a Mac? You guys are on Macs? Very important to know. The disconnection of a power supply to an Apple computer for 60 seconds resets its peripheral communication. If you have an established problem, meaning if you've restart, and it doesn't fix it, all you have to do is disconnect the power. Very, very basic principles. So if you get this far and you get this right on, you should always see this here. Now, how many of you had your interface light up? You saw it. It was lit up before you opened Pro Tools. Right? A couple of you, right? Yeah. Was your inbox assigned on your playback engine right away?
Yes.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. So here's the question. Here's the other thing too. Sorry. It bothers me So just so you know, it bothers me. Bothers me, okay? I'm not mad about it, but it does bother me. You will need, for this class, you will need headphones. You will need a 1/4-inch adapter. If you have neither of those things, you do need to go get them. Find a way to get them. I'm sure even your grandmother has both, right? Get them ASAP. It bothers me when a student will come in, they don't have their headphone adapter. So what do? They switch to either aggregate I/O or built-in output, and then they leave their computer on. The next kid comes in, he has no idea. He's innocent. He just fires up the computer. He doesn't restart it. Immediately, even though the interface is on, he's already in the built-in output, or he's in the aggregate I/O, and his I/O is messed up because he didn't check these steps, or he didn't do a restart. You see what I'm saying? It's very easy. Very easy to do. So, go ahead and choose your inbox if you haven't chosen it already. We do need to talk about this. You answer these questions for me, and I will gladly move on. All right? We'll make this easy for everybody. What the hell is buffer size?
The sample rate.
Oh, here, show of hands. We'll make it easy. Raise your hand, Cameron. Go ahead, bud.
Alright, so a lower buffer size will make it so there's less latency when you're recording. A higher buffer size will make it so your plugins all work smooth.
Yes. Yes. So, and let's talk about just the real basic elements of that, all right? How many of you knew that? Show of hands. How many of you knew that? You knew that, all right? Maybe you forgot, right?
Yes.
So that's your buffer size. Real easy. Buffer. Don't ever forget, okay? The buffer is this brilliant concept. It's a brilliant concept. Think about it. It's like the buffer is this systematic thing where, oh, it's brilliant. See, this is the brilliance of it. You guys didn't even know, what did I do with that? You guys may have not even been aware of the fact that your computer is counting on you to be slow. Computer fast, human slow, right? That's the whole thing. It's counting on you to be dumb and slow, not as fast as it. So what it's going to do is it's going to trick you into thinking that you're in control of what's happening in your operational elements of the computer. And what it does is it's basically saying, all right, I'm going to pour a certain amount of information into what we call the buffer. Now here's the catch. You know who holds the buffer? Does anybody know who the buffer is?
Playback is.
Nope. Buffer, who's the buffer?
We are. We are.
Kinda. Let's talk about computer components. There's some basic computer components. When you build a computer, you need a couple things. I need a power supply. I need what?
A
Processor, a motherboard, what else?
Memory.
Yeah, what kind? Long-term, short-term?
Long-term.
What's long-term memory called?
Hard drive.
Yeah, okay, what's short-term memory called? Yes, and that is your buffer. So if your RAM sucks, if you ever needed to know what RAM was, why is RAM so important? You got 1 gig of RAM, you got a crappy buffer.
Oh, that's horrible.
Yes, that is horrible. That's, you know what, suggested operational use for a functional Pro Tools computer. Back in the day when like computers were just coming on the rise, you had to have a 1.8 gig with 1 gig of RAM in order to even open Pro Tools. Right? So in order to operate Pro Tools effectively, suggested setup right now is at least a 2.0 gig processor with at least 8 gigs of RAM. You have 12?
Yeah.
That's great. 16, even better. 32, you're going to blow your mind.
Oh, I need that.
You know, 60. If you can get to 16, all that stuff where the computer sees it, right?
Yeah.
That starts to go away. Why? Because it's all in the buffer, short-term RAM. The big thing here is that if the buffer is bigger, it's going to have more latency because there's going to be a delay. So what they're basically doing is, it's awesome. It's just brilliant. Think about this. Your water supply, you may not have known this, right? But like your basic water supply, when you turn on the faucet, what happens?
Water comes out.
How does it come out? Does it drip?
No.
Come out in spurts.
Stream.
Right? Water comes out of your faucet in a stream, right? Did you guys know? I don't know. Maybe you don't know anything about the water supply system. is your house, does it just have a direct pipe to the main water district and it's just a single pipe, and when you turn it on, 20 miles down the road at that water district spot, do they just then activate the water supply? No, what happens?
The water's sitting in the pipes.
Yeah, and essentially it's sitting in a small well reserve, right, waiting to be established. Same thing with your think about your hot water system.
Yeah.
How does your hot water, your heater work?
It's just sitting in your
hot water heater.
Yeah, it's just sitting in there waiting to be called up. It's already in there. So think of that. That's how your buffer gets applied. What happens is even with a low buffer rate, you push play, short amount of time of delay happens. Most of the time it doesn't compute with you. You said, hey, when your buffer size is low, there's minimal latency. I mean, in reality, there's always latency. It's just a matter of how calculable it is for you. And if you remember the Haas effect, from those who established a really good foundation in audio, what does the Haas effect tell us? Haas effect, H-A-A-S effect. Haas effect tells us what? It tells us that anything inside of 30 milliseconds delay is not established as a perceivable delay by the human ear. Remember that?
Yeah.
Do you guys remember that? It sounds dumb, doesn't it? Kind of? It sounds a little dumb. You know why that exists? You know why the Haas effect is important for you? You guys remember watching Spider-Man? He gets his spider senses, and then he's like, oh my gosh, I just hear everything. All right, I hear little ants crawling across the floor, and it's driving me nuts because it's just too much. It's overwhelming amount of information. For the human ear, if the human ear heard every reverberated sound as an individual delay, like if you think about what reverb is, if it heard everything inside of 30 milliseconds as a delay, your brain would go nuts and have a really hard time establishing any communication with anybody because of the fact that there's a constant amount of delay going on. Because of the consistent amount of delay and the consistent amount of delayed audio that's happening just when I talk directly to you. If you establish the delay between that, you'd have a real hard time between your ears establishing a communication together. But then, in this instance, the cool part is that the latency only really has to be inside of 30 milliseconds before you perceivably realize that it's late. A lot of times the delay is really more around 18, 20. That's a reasonable amount of delay with your buffer size at a low rate. As soon as you hit a high rate of buffer size, as soon as you jump that buffer size up and you're in a higher established buffer size, this is how the computer establishes the fact that it's going to be late. You push play, and it takes a moment before it kicks off. You ever notice that? That's exactly what it's doing. All it's doing is saying, you know what? Instead of showing the meter and then you hear it, because that'd be dumb. Because you told me that we could raise the buffer size when we're doing like plugins and stuff. Instead of it showing us the plugins and then the audio's delayed, instead what it does is just waits a couple seconds for everything to be ready to go, because it calculates what the delay will be, and it kicks off. And when it kicks off, it feels fluid. The whole time, it was late to begin with. Right? And that's how it's establishing the buffer size. The reason that's important is just for what you said. And if you guys don't remember that or memorize that, if you didn't already have that down, you need to write that down. Low, say it again, just as you said it, Cameron.
All right. So low is smooth recording, little latency.
Yeah.
And then high is so you're plugged into smooth.
Yeah. So essentially, if you're recording, that buffer size needs to be down. If you are mixing, you can take that buffer size up. If you have a great computer, you can just leave that thing down all day. It really depends on what you're running. I actually just bought a piece of software. I love it. It's fantastic. It's this, I think it's called from SonyBox, Hip Hop Strings. And I use a lot of string patches. And this was one of those ones I just happened to come across, and it was like, I wonder what these sound like. Because to be honest, every time I've ever heard hip hop strings, I'm like, they suck. To be honest. And I opened this up, and I'm like, dude, this is better than the string package I had for orchestra. Like, it sounds more realistic. So I bought it. Well, then I figured out why it's not popular. See, but the reason it's not popular, because I opened 4 instances of it, and my computer was like, no! They didn't really establish it, and it's all about how they code it. They didn't code it in a manner that used a low amount of resources of RAM and CPU. It just immediately started weighing down on the system. If you guys ever watch your disk usage meters, that's an option for you. You can see how much is being used while it's being used, how your CPU, how your RAM is being used while you're working. Mine was just going from 0 to poof, 0 to poof, every time I hit a key, and I'm just like, dude, I get it. It sounds great, but what they didn't do is they probably didn't render down the samples so that they're in a reasonable package. And a lot of times what people accidentally do because they're not great at coding is they'll code a whole long stream of file subsets in order to get to the files that are being recalled, instead of finding the shortest path, because the shortest path for a file management stance on a coding, so it essentially creates a faster performing session. So what's interesting about that, to just be aware of, if you had Pro Tools on a hard drive, you have your session on a hard drive, and in that hard drive you had a folder, and in that folder you had a folder, and in that folder you had another folder, and before that other you had a folder. As soon as you go too many folders deep, your computer has to resource all that information and has to look through each subset each time it goes. And it starts to slow down just because it's too deep inside of the folder hierarchy. So a lot of times, that's why most people are like, you know what, I want one established hard drive just for my files, and when I open up that hard drive, instead of having subdivisions of each element, I'm just going to have file, like my client sessions, and then in that, maybe my client name, and then their sessions are right under it, that's it. Right? Because as soon as you establish too many levels, it starts to slow down all the communication. Sorry, that's a lot of information to ignore, or to work on. Well, sorry, look at this. What does this mean?
Doesn't that mean like the errors don't pop up when you're working?
Okay, but let's get to the real situation. Yes. Yes. I like this. Ignore errors during playback or recording. May cause clicks and pops. The errors, it essentially ignores the errors. If you've ever had errors come up, it gives you the DAE error, encountered a problem, and it freezes, and it doesn't go on beyond that. It happens to me all the time, because a lot of times I'm running like 90-something tracks, and I got so much processing, and I just have 20-something guitar channels, just trying to be outrageously bombastic, really just killing it. And, here we go, right into where I wrote all this automation. There's automation on like 20 channels. As soon as we hit that automation point, I'm like, crap, okay, well, I have to reestablish some things in order to make it go beyond that. I could do this. This is fine. So this is kind of an interesting thought. Okay, in video, anybody work with video? Video is kind of cool. I love what video does. I wish they do it with audio. In video, what you can do is you can take HD video, put it into a video editor, and there's a window that shows you all your previews, and you can tell the preview window to either show it at full res or show it at like 10% of the resolution. Meaning you can have the resolution visually, what you see, look like crap. Why would you want to do that? Because if you're doing a lot of edits, and you're doing a lot of processing, it helps you, because if it's HD, it weighs down on the CPU. Well, as soon as you draw it back, what you do is draw it back, you do all your edits, and then once you're ready, you got everything established. Now we're going to go to export. You don't even need to flip it back to high res. Just make sure in your export it's told to be high res on its output, and it'll do it. It'll work just fine. Instead of having all these stops and pauses. This is kind of the same thing, and you got to think of it in terms of this is good for when I'm editing or when I'm doing my mix down, but not when I do my final output. When I do my final mix down, my final output, when I render final time, never use this. Unless it's a demo. When I was working with the band all the time, I was like, forget it. I could care less about resolution because it's just for your eyes only. And maybe there's a pop and a click, so who cares? But when that's going out for a real purpose, can't use it. When you're tracking, you can't use it. Because technically, it will allow pops and clicks. And the pops and clicks are, this is great. Great opportunity to think about this. Pops and clicks are when the buffer is so small and the RAM may be a limited amount of resource that it sputters on the output when it's feeding the input. Same thing when you turn on your faucet and it goes, right? It just didn't have enough coming in before it started letting out. And there was a momentary lapse of stream. I like to use momentary lapse of the stream. When it pops and clicks, it's because the buffer size failed to have enough inside of it coming in before it started putting out, which is why it'll pop and click at 512, but you jump it up to 2056, and all of a sudden things are great. You see what I'm saying? Because it's essentially it's an error. And the problem with it is when you're recording, even though you do want low latency, you still have a risk of creating pops and clicks if you do ignore this. So a lot of times it's easier, and I know I hate it. It makes my blood boil sometimes. And that error comes up, and you're like, damn it, I did everything right. You know, it happens. You know, especially for me, because I'm just like compounding upon. I'll be rewiring in Reason, and I'll be using Sibelius, and I'll have all these string patches coming in. I'll have a live MIDI feed going to my external keyboards, because I like to do all wonderful peripheral as big a bullet out as I can. And I'll run it to the max. You know, as soon as my CPU went up, as soon as I bought a whole bunch of extra RAM, I maxed it out at my low RAM. As soon as I bought extra RAM, oh, well, let's duplicate these, and let's use these, and let's try this. And then you hit a wall there. All right, you know, because you're just kind of filling it up. Well, in this particular process, just make sure that you don't ignore it during recording. You'd rather have it stop and tell you, you know what, at this point in time, there would have been a pop, than for you to record it and then go back and go, oh crap, there's a pop there. And this is something I recorded 2 weeks ago, and I can't just have someone come back in and redo it, or I can't just redo it. You see what I'm saying, right? So if you were in a professional studio, you would never want to choose this, and heaven forbid, you'd never want the client to ever see you activate that. Because believe me, you know, I've been an engineer for a long time. My first 2 years, I had so many clients, you know, because I used to, my first couple of years in the studio, I was constantly in the studio working for other clients. Then after a while, I started working for myself and doing a lot of, you know, customized stuff and doing a lot of one-offs. And because I'm a musician, I hate working for clients, to be honest. You know, that's not my thing. Well, when I was working for clients, they'd call me up and go, hey, there's a pop in my audio. And then you go through it and you listen, and you're like, damn it, I can't find it. Like, I'm listening and I can't hear it. I'm listening and I can't find it. And they're, no, there's a pop in there. And they're like, all right, well, you know, come on by, we'll work it out. You know, and you go through it and work it out. And sometimes it ends up being their system thing. Sometimes it ends up being it clipped on the final. It didn't clip inside the session. It clipped on the very, very final, or in the mastering session, it clipped. There are some established clips. The big thing is that your popping and clicking as a tracking, editing, or mixing engineer is not on your end. I've had people come in and just watch. This is what sucks. They made Pro Tools visual, so it helps us. I've had sessions where the client was looking at the audio file come in and out, and they're like, oh, I hear it come in and out. I hear a pop when it comes in. Well, close your eyes and tell me if you still hear it. You know, and it's like, oh yeah, it's not really there. It's just mental. So it's a big thing to clients. If you ever have pops, I work with the seniors, the portfolio group, and one of the last classes I had them all interviewing for these jobs. And one of the job searches that they did, it had no pops and clicks, and understand, you know, no noise. It was like 10 times pops and clicks in their job description of whatever this job was here in Las Vegas for this media company. And I was like, dude, they must have had a really crappy engineer in the past. Whoever they just let go must have just been sucky at pops and clicks, because I've never seen, to be honest, I don't think I've ever seen a job description ever even mention pops and clicks, because guess what? Pops and clicks is like you tying your shoes. You know, it's like if you don't know how to avoid having pops, clicks, hum, noise, then you must be doing something wrong as an audio engineer. Because that's the easy crap. So there you go. That in a nutshell. Minimize additional I/O latency. This essentially what this is going to do is this is going to try to establish even further levels of what you're doing with pops and clicks. And it takes it down even another level. So a lot of times I suggest not using this unless you absolutely have to. And then dynamic plug-in processing. Essentially, you don't have to use dynamic plug-in processing. But dynamic plug-in processing, what it does is it just establishes you to the ability to say, you know what, I want these plugins to be used up with this processor. So let's say you have 4 processors, and the processors in your listing of processors that you see in your hardware setup, those are actually your RAM as well. So if you have 4 sticks of RAM, you'll be showing as 4 processors. So with your 4 processors, you could say, you know what, I'm going to have my plugins use this dynamic plug-in processing, and what it's going to do is it's going to try to establish the lowest number possible on each processor separate instead of what it normally does where they're in series. The processors normally run in a series unless you tell them to run in what we call parallel. In series, that means as soon as the first one fills, it moves to the next one. As soon as the next one fills, it moves to the next one. In parallel, what they do instead is it'll say, you know what, we're going to send one plug-in to you, one plug-in to you, one plug-in to you, one plug-in to you, one plug-in to you. You know, 2, 2, 2, 2, 3, 3, 3, 3, 4, 4, 4, 4. Right? And it's a more balanced establishment of how the processors are used. This, to be honest, it depends on what your system is. This may or may not benefit you. So, you know, that's something you have to keep in mind. And then, of course, the video engine, we're not going to deal with for now. All right, so your interface is on. What's the next step? Confirm. Playback engine, confirm. I/O. Okay? So make sure you guys have this before you're done. So let's go look at this. Go to Setup, I/O. See, mine's wrong. Wonder if yours is wrong too. Let's see. The I/O has to be one of the most profoundly confusing elements that students work with, and they tend to shy away from a full understanding of it because it just seems so basic. Think about this. This is the craziest part. Have we even gotten into Pro Tools yet?
No.
No. What you have to be very comfortable with is understanding that you need to know this information and establish this first in order to have successful sessions. All right? Which means you may have to take a couple extra minutes to confirm that everything's up and running before you just jump into it. Most people just want to plug and play and go. The misnomer of that process is that you'll plug and play and start going, and all of a sudden you'll hit a roadblock and you'll have no idea what went wrong, and then you'll have to go back and reestablish some of these things correctly. Here's the other thing. If you're in a session and you have to reestablish I/O configuration halfway through, whatever you wipe gets pulled out of the session, and you have to go back and manually remap it. So if you have if you're like me, you have a 40-track session, you want to remap your I/O, that's fine. You're just going to have to, for all 40 tracks, after you reestablish the setup of the I/O, you're going to have to go for each track and reestablish what the I/O mapping means. So fun, right? So all we're going to do here is, let's just talk about a couple of basics. How many inputs do you have on your inbox in front of you? Two, right?
1 and 2?
Yep, right?
I have 1, 2.
What do you have?
1, 2.
3 and 4. Are there line-ins on the back?
It's SP.
Oh, there's spiff, yeah. Forgot. There's spiffs on the back. Okay, well, notice on mine, I have the 003. On the 003, I actually have an 8 in, 8 out, and I can even break it out to 16, 16, 16. And because it has spiff, if you include spiff, there's an extra 2. My mapping, I can tell immediately by looking at it, is wrong. First thing that establishes the fact that it's wrong is it says built-in microphone 1 and 2. I'm not even on the built-in system yet. What does yours say on your I/O? In 1, 2.
Mine says built-in microphone.
Okay, so you're gonna have to reestablish yours. What does yours say? Hang with me. Yeah. As soon as you go on the inbox, you need to be on the I/O. Oh, yours has nothing? You're on the inbox? You already selected the inbox playback engine? Okay. So go to your input tab. Make sure everybody's on the input tab first. All right, so in Pro Tools 2, you should have dealt with this, reestablishing this manually. I'll tell you this, reestablishing this manually is a pain. So much easier to just reestablish this automatically. There's 2 ways to do it. One way is to import the settings to it. Notice on the bottom left, you don't see it on screen here, bottom left. So down here at the bottom left, says import settings. Well, that's an easy way to do it. Another easy way to do it, though, because if you didn't save a set of settings for this, importing settings will help you in no way, shape, or form because you don't have anything to import. Easy way to establish this. So anybody that doesn't, essentially Isabel and William, and everybody else was fine, right? You were fine? You guys were fine? Yeah. Isabel and William, follow these steps with me, and you guys just follow this with me anyway, because you can do this and it won't hurt anything, okay? Oh, and if ever you screw this up, just hit cancel at the bottom instead of OK. So check this out. So here's what we're going to do, Isabel and William. Well, really everybody. Click over here on this, what's listed as the name section, whatever that input is. Click it, hit delete path. Should be nothing there. And Isabel, I think you had nothing to begin with.
No, there was stuff there.
Oh, okay. So we're going to delete it. You guys can all delete this with me. All we're going to do is go down to the bottom, and we're going to hit default. Now, what this is going to do is it'll establish, hey, you know what? It should say up here at the top, it should say inbox. You have a little icon that has the inbox on it. See it? Right? Little blue icon that has the inbox right here above. Yeah. Whatever it shows there, that's what it's going to default to. So as soon as you hit default, look at that. Mine just mapped out all my I/O. Oh, did yours do that? I mean, you don't have a lot of I/O.
It went to 1 and 2, and then 3 and 4.
Yeah, 1, 2, 3, 4. Because that 3, 4, like Cameron said, is the SPDIF, the digital connection. So you should have 4 in there right now, right? 1, 2, 3, 4.
Yes.
This is my listing, my full listing, right? So it's actually 16, even though it says 7 to 8. If you follow, not these numbers here, but if you follow the grid across the top, notice it goes all the way to 16. Actually, there are 2 more down at the end. The SPDIF, 18 on mine, right? Now, here's the catch. If you hadn't done that, when you tried to create a new track in your session, and you went to the input on the individual track, whatever's listed here is listed in that list. Which means if you didn't establish this correctly, or if yours said built in, you could have chosen it, and you would never have any sound because you're not using the built-in interface, are you? You're using the external. So you need it to say that it's mapped to the inbox and that it's on the correct I/O. Right? Make sense? Easy way to do it. So you just delete all that stuff. You're going to delete, right? Delete this I/O and hit default. Now we're going to repeat these steps twice more. Yeah, please keep taking notes on this because this is Wednesday. We should just be able to do this in my notes. This is stuff you're going to do this every day. Not just for my class. Like when you're operating Pro Tools, you should be doing this every day. You don't have to delete it if it's right. I mean, most times what you should do is open it up, and go, yeah, it's right. Just as I left it. Right? It shouldn't be. You shouldn't have to deal with this whole lot. But in the event that you don't, see me, I love this is what I like. I have 3 main interfaces that I use. I have a double O2 rack. I have an 11 rack, which I love. But guess what? It's USB. Not a big fan. So I use it differently than the normal 11 rack. And then I have the inbox 26, M-Audio 2626 profile. That is my above all favorite. It uses a third-party piece of software, but that part sucks. So there's kind of a give and take there. So what I like to do, and this is how I used to have it set up. My old house, not as much as now, my old house had a very limited amount of room. So what I did is I had a piano downstairs, and then I had drums in one room, and then I had my normal setup in another small room. And what I would do is I'd do all my mix downs and editing in the small room. But then I'd take my laptop. I left an interface connected to the drums. So I had an interface downstairs, mic with all the drums, and the interface was separate from the setup upstairs. Then I had another interface at the piano. And all I would do is just take my computer, go to do the drums, do this whole process, map the I/O. Drums are ready to rock. Open up the template for drum tracking. Here we go. Move on to piano. Just gonna move over to where that interface is. I mean, it's easy as just plug in one cable instead of having to re-mic and all do all that stuff. Plug it in, but I have to do this first. Reestablish communication. So when you're doing a lot of the different interfaces, you gotta get real comfortable with this, right? So I/O is good. Repeat the steps twice more. Once on the output and once on the bus. So go to the output. You're just gonna click it, hit delete path. It'll say, hey, this is whatever. It's currently being used. Yeah. Default. Now here's the big catch. When you get to the bus, well, actually, let's wait. Do the output real quick. Reroute the output or remap the output. Oh, I love Pro Tools. It's a love-hate relationship. You've been at it long enough. You're like, man, Pro Tools does really well at this. It sucks at these things. On the bus. Let's go to the bus tab. The bus tab is really confusing when you first see it. How many know what this is and what it does? Anybody? Show of hands.
All right, I hit the default. Then someone is showing
You should only have 2.
out 1 and 2.
Yep, that's all you got. That's all you have for your unit. Okay, what is this? Anybody know? Say it again. All right, this is something you may not have known because most of you are like new generation Pro Tools. Anybody that's from the old school understands that think about this. This is an interesting thought. Your main outs left and right on a large console. So if you go upstairs, you guys go upstairs and go up to the SSL. The left-right main is called mix bus. And on a lot of these larger consoles, they'll have a mix bus A, a mix bus B, a mix bus C. Those are the mains. mixed bus. It's not just called stereo out. It's not just called output, main outs, like all these nicknames they gave it. Output 1 and 2. That's not what it's called. It's called a mixed bus. So a bus, you may have learned that a bus a lot of times is used for auxiliary things like reverb or busing tracks together in a group. But at the end of the day, there's a mixed bus. So all buses are listed here. So you'll see mixed buses. You'll see, as you scroll down, you may see where it says bus 7, 8. Oh, check this out. So here's a great example of this one's jacked up, but it's for a reason. Analog 1, 2, that's our main left, right. We could use 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8 for anything we want. Down here, you'll see there's a 5.1 that someone had already created on here because it has 6 outputs, so you can make a 5.1 bus out listing. Right? So there's a surround sound. And then you have your main buses, bus 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. Now, anytime you see in italics something listed, like see where it says 5.1 in italics, that means it's non-existent because of something that was established incorrectly in the output. And what it's pointing out to is it's referencing the fact that on your output you never established a 5.1 on your output. Therefore, on your bus it doesn't actually officially exist. So notice it says NA. So it's got a bunch of stuff that doesn't exist, that doesn't work. So we're going to have to clear those out. But this is really interesting. I love it. This is probably profoundly the best thing that they did to Pro Tools that I was like, thumbs up, yes, they finally did something good. And I'm only mad at them because when they jumped to Pro Tools, I think, that might have been Pro Tools 9 that they jumped to. They changed their standard limiter that they built into Pro Tools, and the one that they had before was awesome. And they changed it to the Dynamic 3 version, and it sucks. Take a look at this. See all this where it says at the top, name, format, and then it shows channels, left, right. It would show you the breakdown because we can do 7.1. That's why there's an extra 2. Mapping to output. That mapping to output, yours should say 1 and 2, mapping to output 1 and 2. Does it say that?
Yes.
All right, the brilliance of this, and also the problem, you can remap internally your output routing any way you want to. It's good and it's bad. I think it's brilliant, but it's also a problem for you. The reason they did this is, let's say you have your whole mix down in Pro Tools set up to mix outputs 1 and 2, right? So you have your outputs set to 1 and 2. And let's say for some reason you're like, you know what? And for some reason, I can't put them out 1, 2. Great example, maybe your output on channel 1 just died. Crap, but I have 3 and 4 that I could use as my main mix outputs. It'd be really cool to just change that without having to change all of the stuff inside your system, so like inside the session itself. So all you could do is just go, hey, you know what? I'm going to make analog 1, 2 map to 3 and 4. See that? The other brilliant part about this is what I think is brilliant. So let's say you're using your bus for a reverb. Anybody use a bus for a reverb? Done that yet? All right. So I'm using my bus for a reverb. And I just bought this really cool external reverb. I just bought a really cool, $300 reverb, and I want to use it with my in-the-box system, but it's an out-of-the-box device. Well, instead of having to go back and reestablish outputs to that reverb, if your reverb was bus 7, 8, or let's do bus 1, 2. If this was your reverb, all you have to do is map it, right, to any one of your outputs to externally go to an external device. And then all you have to do is send it from that external device back into a pair of inputs. And away you go. Without having to remap everything internally. Because you used to have to, when you wanted to do this, you have to go back and reestablish all of that on the individual channels of every track in order to do that as a one-off. All right, because of this though, this causes some problems. So what we're going to do is we're going to choose any one on the left, hit Command A. Command A, in this instance, just like in word processing, stands for all. All right, so choose all, hit delete. Let's clear them. Now, at the bottom, notice there's something that's going on down here that's interesting. So see where it says default and it says output buses, internal buses. What's the difference between an output bus and an internal bus? Anybody know? Output bus, internal bus. Output bus, internal bus. Output buses are your physical outputs on the interface. Internal buses are where it just says bus 1 through 48, right? So if you only want to hit default to establish your output buses, just have it on output buses. But if you want to do the whole thing, in most cases you do all buses. So make sure it says all buses and hit default. It should now reestablish the correct order. Also, it should show, if you hit the little arrow here, it should show mono versions of the output. Easy stuff, right? This is the other thing to pay attention to. See where it says down here, Audition Paths? When you use Audio Suite, you're utilizing an audition path when you use the Audio Suite. You guys use the Audio Suite? Right? You guys use the Audio Suite? Instead of real-time processing, it's going to process it as a render. Well, they make an audition path for Audio Suite for a couple of reasons. So that if you wanted to map your Audio Suite auditions to a different set of speakers, you could. A lot of times they may do that because the Audio Suite, I don't know if you guys ever noticed that sometimes when you play back the audio, well, I'll tell you why. When you audition in Audio Suite, it auditions your level of your file in Audio Suite at the volume that it was recorded at. So if your volume that it was recorded at for the Audio Suite is high, and you have the faders down low, and you have the master down low, when you play that back, it's going to be extremely loud. A lot of times it happens when you're like auditioning something that on the master fader you brought the masters down, you brought the main faders down. It's just not something you're using a lot in the mix, but you do want to hear it as an audition. It'll blow you out of your seat. So a lot of people, what they do is instead they'll put it on a different path, and they'll just use a different set of speakers for it, or maybe they'll just use headphones for it. You know, when they're doing auditioning for the Audio Suite stuff, so it doesn't blow them out of their seat in a real mixdown. Or the other thing you could do, this is another problem you might have. Upstairs, when everything's out on the desk, you have everything established on the desk. Audio Suite is default. Its default is analog 1, 2. When you map stuff on the desk, like upstairs for a mixdown on an analog console, what you do with the outputs is you don't send anybody to the stereo out. You send everybody to their individual channels. So you kick, channel 1, snare, output channel 2, hat, 3, 4, 5, 6. So if your audition was 1 and 2, and you have kick and snare, you probably got processing on them already. So if you audition down those paths, it's going to sound funky. So a lot of times you just establish a different set of channels that are unhindered that you can just put in the mix. Nice and easy. So that's what that's for. But all that to say, this has to be done. So those are the steps that you need to do in order to establish this correctly. Now beyond that, the insert, if you don't have an insert built into your interface, this is just null and void. All this is if there's an insert path, you guys know what an insert is? Yeah, like essentially it's like a plug-in, but for external devices. In this instance, it's an external insert path. You'd want to have that established to make sure the ones that exist are there. Mic preamps. This only exists if you have digital mic preamps built into the system, which really I'm trying to think who. I think the only ones that do are Apogee, but they use third-party software. They don't use this I/O. The Avid HD Omni, you get that here for that, but in most cases you're not ever going to use the mic preamp version because if you have third-party software, like let's say you have an M-Audio device, even the M-Audio devices don't use this I/O now, which is a whole new learning curve for you guys. And then hardware insert delays. So in the event that you're using hardware inserts, you are able to establish the delay in milliseconds for those insert times. Although hardware delays usually don't encounter a whole large amount of delay versus internal delays because of the processing. Questions on that? Okay. Here's what I want. Go ahead and open up your setup I/O. Setup I/O. This won't take long. Setup I/O. Please delete all inputs, outputs, and buses. Just hit Command A, hit delete. Hit Command A, hit delete. Even if it has a warning, just go for it. Hit Command A, hit delete. Should all be like this, right? Nice and clear. Hit OK. Okay. I want you to shut down your computer. Just give it a restart. And here's the only thought before you do a restart. Shut down instead of restart. Use the shutdown mode instead of restart. Unfortunately, Apple computers have a bit of a glitch when they do their reboots. So the easiest way is to do a shutdown and manually use the button on the back of the computer. Once it's down, just go open it again. So once your computer shuts down, go and fire it back up. And by the way, if you guys ever thoughts, preferences, 2 things you should establish when you have your home recording system. Never use sleep mode. And there's an area where you can tell your, on the left side, there's an area where you can tell your computer to never put the hard drives to sleep. The reason you don't want a sleep mode or hard drives to sleep is particularly because when they reestablish connection, like if you take a break or you're working on something and they do go to sleep, when they try to reestablish their connection, oftentimes they get glitchy immediately after. So, or sometimes they won't even wake correctly. So it's very important to make sure that you're never letting them sleep. I had a live session that I was doing, that I was tracking for like 3 hours, and system went down, and the system went into sleep mode because even though it was recording, no one was actively moving the mouse or the keyboard, and when it's going into sleep mode, a lot of times it's because it's looking for activity on the peripherals, even though it was tracking, and it just dead stopped because it shut down. And that's what it'll do in your tracking sessions. If there's inactivity, so those are things you have to put away. So sleep mode for both the hard drive and the computer system need to go away. You can use screensavers, that's fine. You know, but I hate screensavers, so I never use it. But you know, that's another thing you have to look out for. So go ahead and open Pro Tools. Let's fire this whole thing back up. I want to make sure your inbox is your playback engine. I want to make sure your I/O is established correctly. So you're just going to go through each of these, set them up. Once you're done, I'll come through, check it out. Should be easy. This is the easy stuff, but you have to do this on a daily basis because if you don't get good at this, you're never going to get past step 1. Or you'll get past step 1 on an inconsistent basis. Yep, you have to confirm that's on before you run Pro Tools. Quit Pro Tools first. So all you're going to do with that is switch the interface on and off, the hub. It should be on the hub, so there's a switch on the back of this. Give it like 10 seconds. It usually takes a good bit before it powers back on. Or yeah, you can turn it back on, but when you turn it back on, it takes like a moment. So you'll see whether or not it does or doesn't connect. Yeah, just make sure you guys follow the steps. Your interface has to be on before you open Pro Tools, or this whole thing takes a while. Oh yeah, there you go. Once those green lights are up. Did you get into Pro Tools? You hit cancel, right? Here, hold on a second. Oh, where did you go? Oh, because you're open. Hit cancel. Do it again. Open Pro Tools. Good. Good. You did both input, output, and bus? Yeah. Input, output, and bus? Go cancel. All right. You're on your setup window. Playback engine first. I don't know if you were here first time. So make sure you're on the inbox first. Yep. And then once you're there, you do your I/O. I mean, this is pretty simple stuff, right?
Does it matter as far as the sample rate? I mean, the buffer size?
But you can leave it down for now.
Okay.
It's not an issue at the moment. What I like to do when I go up to the studio, in order to safeguard from having any I/O problems, what I'll do is I'll go up and I'll open up the I/O as they have it, and I'll export the setting just as it is. Export it, just so there's a safe copy. So that if I reestablish any I/O changes on my own before I leave, I just input that setting before I shut off the computer, and whoever used it last comes back in, and just come back in and start where they left off. You know, it's kind of nice. nice.
Plus, if you have a configuration that you like, you might have an established I/O setting specific between the things that you do. So there may be certain applications that you may apply. Well, the other thing is, this is very interesting, is technically you can have multiple interfaces connected to your computer. You can only just choose one to be active for Pro Tools. Well, the problem with that is if you ever have multiples up, a lot of times they'll compete for who's taking the default interface slot, right? And so they'll flip-flop back and forth. So a lot of times you just save the settings for each of them, right? Do the export, and then away you go. All right, so at this point in time, let's go ahead and create a new session, but let's talk real quick about how this works. Before you do it, let's go ahead and go to File, New. And then I'll let you tell me everything I need to know about this. You guys are doing great, by the way. And we're going to take a break at 9:40. So when you see 9:40 come around, 10 minutes, wave your hand at me, and we'll go. Okay, so quiz time. All right, show of hands. Let's start with blank session. You as a professional, to a certain degree, you should use blank session a lot. But you should also use templates. When is it good to use a template? When is it okay to use a template?
Like when, like you said earlier, when you have like a drum session, you have everything already set up, and it just go back to that every time you.
Yeah, it's a good way. Yeah, so when you have something that you already have set up that you want to use a lot. Yep. When else? Those are a really good example. Easy example. Anybody? How many of you have tracked the client? Anybody tracked the client yet? Worked with the client yet?
No.
Kinda? Yeah? Yeah? Okay. Yeah, I know. It takes a while. It takes you a little bit to get there, and once you get there, away you go. Here's what happens when you track with a client. They come in and they want to do 6 songs. Right? So what should you do in order to do 6 songs? What I always do is I establish the first session first. And I don't make templates until we actually start going and we finish the first session. As soon as we finish the first session, do you like the workflow that we used? Oh yeah, it worked out great. All right, save it as a template. When I open the create the new next session, save it as a template, artist name, maybe sometimes the date, depending on how often we're doing stuff, and then create the next session from the template. So, I mean, because why else would you want to rework all that from the ground up? It'd take you so long, especially if it's drums. Oh my gosh, I had a band come in one time, and they had like 2 drummers. They want to do everything live. They had 2 drummers, 2 full drum sets. They had like 3 guitar players, and then they had a bass player, a keyboard player, and a vocalist. And everything's up. I mean, that's a ton of stuff. Could you imagine having to rework the I/O for that? Yeah, it'd take forever. So, because the cool part is by saving your template, it saves your I/O mapping, channel by channel. It'll save your plugin settings. It'll save everything. So that's good. When not to use a template, I'll tell you when not to use a template. Don't ever use the crap that they put up there. That's bull. That's all there for someone that doesn't know Pro Tools to go, oh, the reason I should buy this versus Logic is because this has cool templates. Right? Seriously, that's a bunch of bull. So only use it when it's yours. It's user-specified templates. Those are really good for you to use. Well, let's talk about session parameters. This day and age, where it says audio file type, that doesn't matter anymore. I gotta be honest, it doesn't matter at all. It used to. You know why it used to? The reason that the audio file type used to matter is because WAV used to be exclusively Mac. A little over 5 years, I'm sorry, AIFF. A little over 5 years ago, you couldn't get an AIFF to run on a PC. Oh my gosh, you could imagine how hard that would be. It sucked for me. Every time I had an AIFF file from my Mac, and I try to run it on a PC, I'm like, dang it, I have to convert it somehow. So then you have to find a way to convert it. iTunes wasn't big at the time, so people weren't using that. But WAV was designed as an exclusive to Windows. AIFF was designed as an exclusive to Mac. Now they don't matter. And even then, before all this audio file type, there were like 6 others that used to exist that no one uses now. SD2. I'm trying to think what was the other one. There's one other one that was like really, really popular. But you could have had anything from MP3, AAC. I mean, lots of different file types. Oh, that's right. They had like MIDI Magic or something like that. There was a lot of different other file types. But now there's just the 2. I could care less which one you use because it doesn't really matter because they're both now compatible and they're universal. Is there a quality difference between the 2? Technically, audibly, not necessarily. AIFF was established from one company. WAV was established from another company. Both have superior quality. They are uncompressed audio, meaning full res. Okay, so that's very important to know. The codecs are different. How they generate are different, but I mean, there's no way you'd stand them up side by side and go, "Oh, I like this one better." You'd never in your 100 years be able to do it. Bit depth. Okay, so here's the thing. What's the difference between sample rate and bit depth? Raise your hand. Cameron, you're out. Anyway, so you've already answered too many questions. Who else have you got? William, if you answer this one, this is your last one, all right? For now.
The bit depth is like 16 is like for like CD quality,
Okay.
and then the 24 is like more of the like the DVD quality,
Okay.
and the sample rate is the rate that the computer reads the samples.
Kind of, yeah, kind of. Sal, do you have any thoughts?
What's that going to be adjusted to what is 48 and then 44? Well, 44 with 16-bit and 40 with 24.
Hold that thought, because you're in a different vein, but you're correct. You're in a different area, so I'll walk you through that.
All right.
Savannah, do you know?
Well, I know like sample rate is like how many times it samples the signal in order to put it.
Okay. Isabel, what you got for the answer here?
I don't know.
Okay, so let's start the basics, okay? Anybody heard of the Nyquist theorem? Sample theory?
Yes, I can't remember.
Sample theory. All right. Sample theory, Nyquist theorem. This is just kind of one of those brainy things that it's like, it's good to know. It's good to know for a reason. Here's the established reason. Any system that's digital is required to take twice as many samples or snapshots per second of each frequency, twice as many. So if you're telling me that the human hearing range goes from 20 hertz to 20,000 hertz, I have to have at least 2 times 20,000 hertz in order to get an effective image of digital audio. The catch is, you notice it goes to 44.1. There's a theory behind that too. The theory behind why should we go to 44.1? 44.1 is 2 times of what? 44.1 divided by 2 is? Point? Yeah, well actually it's 0.05 because it's 44.1. So 22.05. In reality that's 22,050. Because that point is because we use the K, right? So when we say 44.1, it's really 44,100 samples per second. So the reason we have to go up so high, that little bit of overage, is because there's things that we know as harmonics. And I don't know how many of you are musicians, you've heard of harmonics. Harmonics are generated by a single tone entity that resonates off of another body. And essentially, a pure tone by itself has no harmonic. But as soon as a pure tone is involved with some resonating body, it generates harmonics. And as soon as it generates harmonics, they're both above and below. They're additional tones to the sound that are still audible, but not clear enough to be denoted as a single tone. So they're still in the sound. It's the difference between why a trumpet sounds the way it does and a bass guitar sounds the way it does. Tonally, it's the amount of harmonics that are involved. Well, the idea is that although the human hearing range is 220K, so we go all the way up to 20K, anything that's produced above 20K still generates lower harmonics, which means that anything that does exist beyond our human hearing range still has audible tones that fall in our hearing range. So there's the overage. They call it anti-aliasing, the anti-aliasing method. That's the whole point of it, in reality. So that's why we go to 44.1. Now let's talk about this. So, easiest way to think about it, you should know this. If you guys don't know this, this is huge. You guys are a little behind on this, okay? So this should be like, you guys already take this down? You guys already write this down? You'll be quizzing these Wednesday. Make sure you have them verbatim. You got them? This is stuff you should know. So I'm so sorry that you don't, but you're going to know today, and after today, I expect you to know this. All right? This is the easy method. I'm going to give you the easy method. Easy method in terms of understanding the difference. Sample rate is equal to sample rate equals frequency resolution. Same thing like you taking a picture with a 5 megapixel camera versus you taking a picture with a 50 megapixel camera. What's the difference?
Quality.
Quality. And think about it. What's the quality? Yeah. What's the real difference? It means that they both look great as thumbnails, but as soon as you zoom in,
Right.
blow them up, one looks awesome and one looks crappy, right?
Right.
Follow me? So that's exactly what's happening with the audio. Because in reality, the audio that you're using, these frequencies, as soon as one of these frequencies, if they're not done at a high enough sample rate, as soon as one of these frequencies are required to do something a little different, now all of a sudden we're going to have a problem with quality. What's that little difference? Well, DJs do it all the time. You know, what do DJs do all the time? Speed it up, slow it down, warping. Time warping, time stretching, time compression. If you were to shrink it, just like a thumbnail, resolution increases. If you were to stretch it, what happens? Yeah, quality goes down. If you use a high enough sample rate to begin with, you'll never fall below the Nyquist theorem. What's the Nyquist theorem say? At least 2 times. And in our established theory, the way that we have it set up, the lowest sample rate that we use is 44.1. So if you never break it down below 44.1, you'll never have an audibility problem. But at the same time, if you use a higher resolution to begin with, it's basically just like starting with a really high quality picture. And everything we do when we edit it is high quality, high quality, high quality in all of our edits and all of our mix down and all of our manipulation. It may go out to iTunes as a 44.1 still, and that's fine. But that means that it started at high res and we downgraded it to go out for its final export. Instead of having it always be there, because anytime the audio files get manipulated, technically their sample rate quality is jeopardized. So it's very important to know that. Super simple, right? Sample rate equals frequency resolution. Bit depth equals, this one's easy too. Bit depth equals dynamic resolution. What is dynamics?
Process.
Well, in this instance, no. Yeah, but processing to a certain degree. Certain processing. Dynamics at its very core, simplistic form, volume. Volume. And the difference between the word dynamic and the difference between the word volume, dynamic usually considers a range. Dynamic meaning very quiet to very loud. Volume is just a term of how that would be referenced. The reason why dynamic resolution is so important is because in a 16-bit volume resolution, you only have 16 bits of characters to denote the difference between this volume of this instrument and this volume of this instrument. And even the volumes of each of them as they step down. So you guys remember the book? Like from your Pro Tools 1 and 2? The book that showed your bit resolution is something like this. You guys remember this? It showed this little step series. Essentially what it is here, I'll draw it over here. Essentially what it's saying is you know what? This is all code, if you've forgotten. When you go to digital, all the digital representations of audio are all code. There's no audio in there. If you were to jump inside of your computer, there's no audio in there. It's just code. Isn't that crazy if you really think about it? Your computer has no reference of what audio even is. All it knows is it's receiving digital input from the converter, because the converter is converting it to such, and it just takes that code and sends it on its way. And that's all it's doing. It's code transfer, code transfer, code transfer. And because of it, one line of code, so 16 bits, your one line of code, it's all in binary, right? Here's your bits. Right? So I'm not going to draw them all out. And what this is this is a code sequence that establishes both waveform frequency and waveform volume. The amplitude, right? The amplitude of the volume, right, versus the length of the frequency, of the length of the wave, right? It's all based upon an establishment of coded numbers. And by having more steps, by having essentially 16 coded steps, we have a limited number. By adding 8 more, all of a sudden we just established this higher resolution of dynamics. 32-bit float is brilliant because 32-bit float, this is what they did, is they just said, you know what? We're going to add an extra 8 bits. No, it's not usable right now. So in most cases, if you export at 32-bit, all you're going to play back at the highest resolution you can even get playback with will be 24. For DVD, like you were saying, DVD, Blu-ray, 24. Or digital, 24. So even if you have 32, it only plays 24. It has to just kind of figure out which 24 it wants. It just takes the most important. The 32, the reason they call it a float is because all they did is they added an overage of resolution, and the overage of resolution is there so that when you're doing all your plug-in processing and you're using audio suite rendering, you're doing all this elastic audio stretching, there's an overage of resolution. In the same way that, you know, in reality you could use 192K, but you're never really going to export it at 192K because there's nothing that's going to play it back except Blu-ray at this point in time. So it's kind of a waste, but that overage again is just established to make sure your audio quality stays pristine. So there you go. That in a nutshell. The I/O, last used, you could actually, you know, at this point in time, you know how the I/O settings that we just did in that mapping? If you wanted to save your settings for I/O and you want to import them as soon as you open this new session, you could change them right here. And then what is interleaved? You guys should know what interleaved is. Raise a hand. Interleaved. After this, we'll take a break. Interleaved. What's interleaved? This is right. It is left and right, but what does it mean? Say, hold that thought. Sal, let me hear you, bud.
I just think stereo.
What does it mean? No. No. Say again? Okay, yeah, kinda, yeah. Interleaved. You guys know stereo. You did 5.1, so you should know interleaved 5.1. Interleaved means multiple channels, one file. That's what interleaved means. Multiple channels, one file. So, because if you don't use interleaved files, on like you guys have all done a bounce out before. You guys did a bounce out and you did stereo interleaved, something called stereo interleaved. If you did multiple mono, you ended up with 2 different tracks, 2 different files, a left and a right. Well, what can you do with that? You can't just say, here, I'm going to put it on my iPod, here's my left channel, here's my right, because what do? They play separately. They don't play together. Interleaving is the establishment of taking any number of files, 7.1, 5.1. You can take a 5.1 file, mix down, you put it on one mix, one file output. You can take that, and then you can just sling it around. It'll open up as 5.1, and anything that has a codec that opens 5.1. So if you were to take a 5.1 and burn it on a CD, it'll do nothing. But if you take a 5.1 and you burn it on a DVD, and then you go play it on a DVD player, like a stereo system at your like a surround sound system at your house, there you go. There's your 5.1, right to this. It's one file, interleaved. The reason, now, that's all talking about export. The reason interleaved exists on a session is different. When I was growing up doing Pro Tools, if you ever did a stereo track, it was 2 files, a left and a right. And it made it a little complicated because even if it was a stereo audio track, the stereo audio track would still be a left and a right. It made it complicated because if you were to drag that audio file out of the audio files folder or go search for it, you had to have a left and a right file, 2 files. What I like about interleaved is it's one file. So get this is really interesting. Pro audio professionals, pro audio individuals do not use bounce. So just FYI. Now I still use bounce sometimes, but I don't bounce on final renders. Bouncing on final renders is not a good process because you're relying on the computer to encode correctly, and it does it in real time, but either during the process or after it does the resolution encoding process, either before or during or after. The problem with it is it does that in a non-real-time format. So the most effective way professionals actually do their final mixdowns is they re-record back into the session. So final stems are always put what we call a print. When you put it to print, it means it's being recorded, right, in a finalized format that's recorded back into the same session. What a lot of people will do, like in the studio upstairs, they'll send it to a more expensive encoder, like an interface. So it's like a $3,000 interface up there. What they do is they route it to the interface. That interface dumps SPDIF, right? Or actually it uses the AES EDU, but it's the same thing as SPDIF, digital input-output. And from the converter, it converts it in a $3,000 converter, sends digital to a digital link inside the interface, because we can only have one interface essentially hosting the whole session, and then it throws it in there at the highest resolution, pristine quality form that it can, but it's doing it as a mix down into the tracking system. Long story short, you follow me so far? So instead of doing bounces, you'd make a new stereo audio track in Pro Tools, and you'd actually have it mix, record everything back into Pro Tools.
So like, you mean like lesser dubbings?
Yeah, but dubbing is a form. Dubbing is considered just a form of overlay. This would be a final layer. Like the word dubbing just means adding layers. You know. So, but yeah, I mean, you actually you're going to record it. Essentially, yeah, you're going to record it, and you're going to record it, you know, end to end, start to finish. Well, problem with it is that all the professionals were doing that, and guess what? If they recorded it as a stereo file, if you don't check interleaved, even when you've done all that process, you still have to do one more render in order to join them together to be one file. So if you choose interleaved and you do that mixdown process, you record it once, it's a stereo file, but you can pluck it out as just an individual file. So I mean, interleaving means a combination of however many multiple files into one file, right? Multiple channels into one file. Make sense? Pretty simple. I use that all the time. I prefer to use interleaved, preferably, especially since if I'm going to sling stuff, I'm going to export, import stuff. I use a lot of people. I got a lot of friends that I use, and I'll say, hey, you know, here's the music file. Here are my music stems. You know, and ask them, you know, can you record some guitar on this? Can you record some bass? And they'll do that at their own home studios, and they'll send it back. And using interleave files means that if I recorded like 5 stereo files, I only have 5 files. If I recorded without interleave, I had 5 stereo files. I have 10 files. Hey, we're gonna take a break. Hey, Isabel, we're gonna come back at 10:10. Be back at 10:10. We're gonna take a break. You have a question? Go ahead.
Yeah. My next class is a online class
Starts today.
and I had a couple cats in my restaurant got caught drinking on the job, and I have to fire them today. So the next couple weeks, I'll be having to work the
Doubles or something?
yes, the night shift. On these days, I'm off because I gotta hire some cats and get them trained.
Do you need to drop the online class?
Yes, and it was a general ed class, English composition.
Are you able to take something else? Are you gonna push it to the next term?
I done pushed the next term. I'm just gonna see, can I just because I had 2 classes last term. Now can I just run with this one class for
Yes.
right now?
Do 2 the next time?
Yes.
Yes.
Okay.
What do you want to do the next time? Same thing? Would you rather do the same English class next
I'll
time?
do the English class, but not online if I could.
I think there's only a 102 class offered next term.
And that's
Level 2. Did you already do?
English.
Which one were you on?
I was doing I think English
1 or 2?
I think 1.
Oh yeah. Yeah, then you'll have to wait until the term that falls out for that. But I can still find something for you to take. We could, you know,
I mean as far as next term.
yeah.
Okay.